We'll start the program.
And please be careful with.
I don't have a strong voice and I apologize for that. I'll get as loud as I can, but can't hear me. Raise your hand, I'll do better. So while he's getting set up, I'll go through the logistics. So first off, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and to meet the candidates and to listen to the proposed budget. My name is Carolyn Fagan. I am the current president of the Board of Trustees here at the library. And was also a librarian here for almost 30 years. I would like to thank the candidates for their enthusiasm and interest in becoming a member of the Board of Trustees of the Troy Public Library. Running for the board takes dedication, and I know it's not an easy thing. And I think we can all say that we appreciate your willingness to step forward and take on that responsibility. The structure for this segment will be as follows. The candidates will all be asked the same questions with a minimum of 3 questions being asked. Each candidate will be introduced and given 2 minutes for their introduction, where they can tell us more about themselves and their reasons for running. They will be introduced first in alphabetical order, matching the order in which they'll appear on the ballot. Following the introductions, questions will be asked in a random order, beginning and ending with different candidates to ensure fairness and balance. We have a total of 4 potential questions, which will be asked. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. We will also be accepting questions from the audience to be asked at the end of the session. These questions will be posed to all candidates. We won't be accepting questions that are directed towards a specific candidate. We have index cards, as we mentioned, in the back. We have some here, and pens. So if you want to ask a question or write a question out, I think you moved up to the back. Just once your question is written down, if you want to raise your hand, Tim will come around and collect it. So that's it. I think that's at the end, we will try to do all those questions due to time constraints. I know Tim kind of tried to rush so that we could get through this. We may need to limit the number of questions from the public, though we will make every effort to address as many as possible. So let's get right to it. We will start with the 2-minute introductions. First, we have Marie Gabazzi.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you all for coming. I'm afraid I'm not a particularly good speaker. So unfortunately, one doesn't have to be on the board. I have 9 years of experience as a library trustee with 2 years as treasurer. I'm running again to use my institutional knowledge to ease the library through the major leadership transition that's occurred. I've used the Troy Library for decades. I chose.
They tried, and it's working.
Okay, sorry. I chose to live in downtown because of the easy access to the library. My usage patterns have changed, but I'm still passionate about the library, the Troy heritage it represents, its buildings and offerings. I've been described as a jack of all trades. Having used computers professionally, I'm comfortable in the digital world. My MBA degree provides me with a wide knowledge base, including the important area of library finance. I also have an MSW, which instilled me with values consistent with serving on the library board: objectivity, tolerance, and a respect for privacy. My education and professional experiences have provided me with solid research and analytical skills. I'm an enthusiastic listener and information accumulator. These characteristics mesh well with my problem-solving penchant. I particularly enjoy the synergy of working with the team, my wonderful board members here. With these strengths, I can contribute not only to my own insights to issues, but also represent those of the public. I also continue to be a union member as a retiree. Despite having no previous experience, I've helped the library to meet its need for additional funding by identifying and applying for grants. Through these efforts, the library has installed air conditioning for the first time in its history. I'm an energetic Troy supporter involved in a number of Troy civic, historical, and beautification efforts. Most valuable is my proclivity for developing a community network on which I can rely for the benefit of the library. Also essential is that I'm able and committed to give the time required with our small board. Please vote for me so I may continue to help make the choices that will set the direction of our library in these evolving times.
Yes. Okay, and I should mention to the candidates that Rhea will be the timekeeper, so she's gonna hold up when you have a minute left, when you have 30 seconds left, when your time's up. Thank you, Marie. And now we're on to Evelyn Katz, please.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you for everyone too for being here today. It's one of the most important things you can be involved in. Hello, everyone. I am Evelyn Katz Greenstein. Yes, raised and reared in Troy, but fully aware that living in the past is not going to help the library meet its challenges. It needs to find the path to change so it can move forward. I'm running for the board, so my 12 years of experience on this board and my 8 years of experience on the Upper Hudson Library System Board can be used in service to the library and the community. I take being a trustee very seriously. In 12 years of service, I never missed a board or committee meeting, not just attending, but throwing myself into the governance work that needed to be done, as well as helping with library projects and programs. 5 of those years were spent as president of the board, several others as vice president. Since October, I have attended nearly every publicly available meeting the board has held. I bring an interesting mix of having institutional memory, accurate memory, as well as vision of what this library could actually be to this community. My commitment to the library and trusteeship led me to be recruited for the board of the Library Trustees Association section of the New York State Library Association. And in that role, again attended the annual advocacy day at our state legislature. I've also continued attending NILA conferences, attending workshops and webinars presented by Library Professional Association in order to keep up with the ever-changing landscape of best practices. I've been an active patron of the library for most of my life, so know firsthand what the library can offer its community. As a trustee, I will work to ensure this institution continues to be responsive to, and be part of our community. As a trustee, I will always be forthright and make sure the public is aware of how the board is making decisions in governing the library. Most importantly, I will always be a strong and vocal advocate for the Troy Public Library, not just once a year, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha Herter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm very appreciative. This is actually my first time running for any office in any election of any kind. So I apologize if I sound a bit nervous. I don't normally give speeches, so this is very new to me, but I'm very excited about it. I had moved to Troy about 3.5 years ago from Portland, Oregon, but I grew up in New Jersey. I have a legal background. I used to practice divorce law, but I came to find out that that wasn't really the right path for me. And so in kind of starting to find myself, I realized that there's so much more that I'd love to experience in this life than what I currently do as my career, which I did actually end up moving back into the law, but now I'm practicing as a litigation paralegal here in downtown Troy. And I'm absolutely loving it. It feels like family to me. And that's one of the things that actually drew me to the library, because I feel like the current library board has a very family feel to it. And I've watched a lot of the meetings. I've watched a lot of board meetings that are outside of just the library. I love participating in them and just observing. And it drew me in completely and entirely. And It was one of the first things I did when I moved to Troy was get a library card. And I'm sure a lot of you can resonate with that. It's hard not to, and it's hard not to come here. And it's hard not to be excited when you walk through the walls, and that's what I want to continue participating in. So thank you very much.
Thanks. And next we have Anthony Bowen. Want to mispronounce your last name.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim and Carolyn, and the rest of the board members. Thank you to all of you for taking time out of your Wednesday night to come here and listen to a budget presentation and meet all of us. My name is Anthony Moen, lived in Troy for the past 8 years. My wife and I live just down 2nd Street, just a few blocks from the main branch. And so we're here regularly, just stopping in, sometimes with our dog, checking out books. And I'm running for the board just because I know how important the library is to the community. Beyond using it myself, I've met with clients here. I've seen how people regularly come in here just to use the computers, take advantage of the services, use it as a community space to meet and learn and share resources. And it's just so important. I think, Tim, particularly for the presentation, emphasizing how the library's been doing so much with so little for so long, and the need to just increase our budget just to deliver the services that we have been reliably, beyond just thinking about what the future of the library has in store. So a little bit about myself. I am a lawyer. I do work for the Legal Aid Society over in Albany, work with a lot of lower income people, and have previously served on the Troy Planning Commission. Some of you may recognize me from that, and also on the board of Joseph's House. So I'm no stranger to what board service means and the obligations that it entails. And I hope to bring that expertise to bear on making the library something stronger and better for the community as a whole. So I hope I have your support on September 16th. Thank you.
And Louis Sirius.
Hi, everyone. My name is Louis Siragusa. Like Samantha, this is also my first time running for any sort of public office. I grew up not far from here, just outside Saratoga Springs. I lived in a rural area. When I went out to college, I lived in a rural area. And after college, I lived in a rural area outside Rochester. So when I came to Troy, I had my first real experience of community. I finally felt connected to people. I started making friends. I, started recognizing faces on daily walks, and that turned out to be a very special experience for me. I didn't really understand what I had been missing, and I don't ever want to give it up now. So that was 7 years ago when I moved to Troy. And I feel like it is past time that I give back to the community, which is why I'm running for office here. And because community is so important to me, the library is a cornerstone of this community. And I would love to have the chance to do everything I can to help it be the best version of itself it can be. So I have a master's degree from Vermont Law School, bachelor's degree in physics. And I currently work for a company that no one has ever heard of called the New York ISO. And we help run the power grid for New York State. So I'm not new to challenging subjects at the very least, and I am very excited to give it my all. Thank you.
So this part is where we'll ask specific questions, which the candidates have been given ahead of time. They each have 1.5 minutes to answer. The first question is, one of the obligations of a public library trustee is a duty of obedience. This means that a trustee or board member has a responsibility to ensure that the institution's resources are dedicated to the fulfillment of its mission. As a trustee, how will you work to fulfill this obligation? And we'll start with you, Louis.
All right. Hello again. So in order to fulfill my duty of obedience when I am a board member, I will make sure that 100% of our tax dollars go towards supporting the library and supporting programs that benefit every member of our community. So that means supporting the existing programs that the library has to offer, of which there are many, such as the assistance with tax services tax documents and job applications, the educational programs for children, resources for homeschooling, the new seed library. The list goes on. It also means fostering new programs that will benefit all of us. And most importantly, it means paying the staff who implement these programs and services because they are the pillars of the library.
Anthony, we're just gonna go backwards for this one. So Anthony, you're next.
So as I said before, I have served on boards before. I was a member of the board of Joseph's House, and so I'm no stranger to how a board member works with the director and the management of an organization to ensure that all the funds are appropriately used in the service and mission of that organization. I know that libraries are a little bit different of an animal than a regular nonprofit organization. There are different laws and regulations, and I'm certainly going to endeavor to make sure that we're up to date on all those and complying with all those. But I know that it involves a lot of working hand in hand with the director, Tim. Looking over the budget, making sure that all the expenditures are in line, and making sure that the staff is appropriately handling everything to make sure that everything goes in furtherance of the library's mission. So basically, it's part of the role of the trustee just to ensure that it is, you're ultimately the fiduciary of the organization to ensure that all of the funds are appropriately disposed of.
I have to admit that when I first saw this question, I thought it was a little bit, I don't know if bizarre is the right word, but I kind of thought obedient sounded very intense. But it did remind me of when I did practice law, the fiduciary duty and how important that is to any administration, any governance of any entity. But in really leaning into the question, I sort of started to feel like perhaps the scariness of obedience didn't have to be so scary when it's thought of as the mission, almost like the captain of the ship. And the mission as the captain of the ship being to connect our community to materials, experiences, and welcoming spaces that spark curiosity, inspire joy, and support lifelong learning. That to me can be brought into every single conversation that's had in the board, whether it's about finances, staff, just administration matters, finance, if I said that already. But simply to be mindful about what the mission is and let that guide the conversation. That to me, I think being obedient to the mission and letting it guide us and letting it guide the conversation of what wants to arise in those meetings and allowing the space for that is how I will try to be obedient. Thank you.
Not sure, but it is in the handbook.
I saw that.
Help ourselves. No, I know. Evelyn?
The theme of an investment conference I attended was question everything. That's the first part of how I fulfilled this obligation. Board members need to look critically at every expenditure the library makes. In my time in office, I requested that every item in the purchase journal was annotated with information on the expenditure. Board members should also be working with administration on expenditures. It's the community's money, and we need to show care in how it is used. The other part is ensuring that the library be funded appropriately. Financial asks need to fund what the community deals necessary. Well, it is difficult to say. This community is considered not just disadvantaged, but distressed. It's why we are granted that 90-10 split in construction grants by New York State. While you have seen the 2.8 average increase statistic, please note that the first years after failing to change from an association library to a special district library, that the board was budget gun shy for a few years. Then the board, which I was on, did increase the tax levy year after year, because otherwise we can't fulfill the public's needs. We also need to acknowledge that one of the library's most important resources is its staff. While operational issues come under the jurisdiction of the director, it is also up to the board to guarantee safety, appropriate compensation for the services they render.
I love this question. I actively participate in the governance of the library by asking questions and making informed decisions. This is a working board, not one just That's a yes board. As a board member, I'll promote actions consistent with our mission by following our bylaws and the laws and legal requirements applicable to our library. Our mission is the base on which the governance framework rests. I would provide guidance to the director that is consistent with our mission. The duty of obedience encompasses a strong fiduciary responsibility and requires the board to be a faithful steward of the library's resources. I would seek to create a budget that supports our mission. Value-based budgeting allocates funding based on the priorities that have been identified with that mission. I would only authorize expenditures in accordance with the budget. I adhere to the principle of separation of financial duties. For example, currently a staff member creates the checks for expenditures and two others, usually the director and the treasurer of the board, sign checks. Reduces the opportunity for malfeasance. Before signing, I review each associated bill. The Office of the State Controller emphasizes the importance to adhere to policies in order to avoid financial abuse. I will encourage the creation of financial reports in a timely manner, which the city has had a problem with. And also review the reports to ensure that funds are being spent appropriately. I'll seek the completion of yearly conflict of interest statements by board members and appropriate staff and enforce the nepotism policy.
So the second question is, what is your perspective on how the library should handle requests to remove or restrict access to books or materials? How would you respond if a group you disagree with requested to use the library facilities or present a program?
And we'll start with you, Anthony.
So when it comes to groups asking to access the library, use the space, the facilities, the law is fairly clear on this, that the library as a public institution cannot discriminate based on point of view of any group coming use the space. You know, as a trustee, I think it's also incumbent on the fiduciary responsibility of the board not to open up the library to unnecessary litigation costs by trying to pick and choose. So as long as the group is, you know, meeting all the formal requirements, complying with the code of conduct, this is a public space. This is a space for people to use as long as people are meeting all the basic requirements and following all the procedures. It's not our place to turn people away simply because, you know, another member of the board, another member of the community or staff disagrees with what they have to say. As far as the question about materials selection, you know, I know that I reviewed the ALA's materials selection procedures. Obviously, space is limited. We can't have every single item on our shelves. We can't have every single piece of media available to the users of the library. So there are processes in place for how things are chosen. In general, you know, I'm against censorship and against bans coming in, but there is a process for how those requests for reconsideration for anything that has been placed on the shelves to be evaluated. That is, has to be done in a transparent way and complying with those policies to ensure that we're doing it in a fair manner.
Yes. Go ahead, Smith. Yep.
No, I didn't know which direction.
No, yes.
I jumped ahead of myself. I'm actually really glad that Anthony went before me because I think that his response was excellent. I don't know that I have much to add to that. I think you spelled it out perfectly. I suppose the only thing I would add is I have a huge passion for curiosity. It's been something that has been with me my whole life. And I feel like is part of what got me here. And curiosity to me is something I have a really hard time speaking out against. And I think there's something interesting about the inquiry behind any kind of disagreement or any kind of agreement. So if there was any kind of proposition as to any sort of program or materials to come in that may be in line with a viewpoint that I have or in disagreement with a viewpoint that I have, I welcome that. I welcome the learning process, and I think that's the epitome of what the library stands for. So thank you, Anthony, for your lovely preface to the little that I had to add. So thank you.
Evelyn?
As a patron, parent, board member, I stand for access to material. I have signed the freedom to read, right to read petitions, and in my time on the board with the director at the time, had the board sign it also. We also ensured that the library has a policy on access to materials and the request to remove. Education and exploration should not be stymied. Now more than ever, we need an educated and informed populace. The same answer goes to the second part of the question. Discourse is imperative, even if I don't like what I might hear. The library provides community space, and as long as all members of the community are treated with respect by presenters and presentations are made with safety in mind, community members need to be heard. And yes, there is also a space usage policy. Before I went off the board, we were watching another library clarify theirs in order to bolster ours. When this question was first being developed, there was a thought to add, apart from policy, but if you speak with anyone involved in libraries, administratively or legally, having written available policy in place before issues arrive can solve those problems.
I feel a little strange responding to this question with two lawyers having preceded me. The board did pass a resolution supporting an individual's choice of materials and parental determination of access for children. Library policy indicates that an individual can request administrative reconsideration if a disagreement occurs with a library selection. If there is still disagreement after the reconsideration, the request can be submitted to the board. Lastly, library material can be removed only by court order if a decision that opposes what had been decided by the library. I have no problem with the group, which I disagree with, using the library, unless the activity is illegal. The library policy allows meeting room use for meetings open to the public that are not for profit. My personal belief is that my exposure to opposing views is important in order for me to continue to test whether my positions are correct.
The first question, I don't support book bans. I don't think that enlightenment arrives through censorship. Second question, the library is for everyone. I don't think that the library should be in the habit of turning people away based on ideology. That being said, the library needs to be a safe and welcoming place for everybody. The code of conduct explicitly says that the library staff and patrons deserve safety and comfort while in the library. Hate speech is antithetical to safety, plain and simple. So I think that people who use the library space need to follow the code of conduct. And if they do not follow that, they should be asked to leave.
The third question. What do you see as the most important role of our public library in the Troy community? And this, I'm going to start with you, Samantha.
I felt like this was both a hard question and an easy question because there's so much, there's so many roles that the library plays in terms of being a partner with the community, being a friend, being a resource. Being a resource is really the biggest one, but it sort of assumes that there's information sharing. And I think that to me is the biggest role that it plays, is being a harbor for the sharing and exchange of information. And that to me is a beautiful, beautiful thing that, just kind of piggybacking off of the last question in terms of censorship, it just seems like that's the antithesis of what a library really stands for. So really the role, to me, the most important role is just allowing for the continuation of the exchange of information, whatever that is. Thank you.
We're gonna change it up a little bit. We're gonna go to Marie next.
I think the most important role is providing for ongoing education. Continuing to learn is essential to lifelong vibrancy and maintaining skills. And I'm so pleased that I'm not excluded from participating in this service. I believe this includes helping patrons identify misinformation, which is such a big concern nowadays. Also, I think it's important in terms of providing technological capability for all of us. I know I don't have the same stimulation in terms of technology that I had when I worked and in other settings. So it's become increasingly important to have other sources in this area. I also feel that the social and cultural infrastructure that the library provides is extremely important to our community. It's a third place and a place to avoid social isolation. The library fills in the gaps. I come here when I want to make color printouts or when my printer doesn't work. I don't have to drive 10 miles to go to a Staples. And in truth, it's probably less expensive here. Thank you.
Evelyn?
I'm not joking when I say I'm fond of commenting that the library is the one institution that stitches together Troy's neighborhoods. We have a few. We even have neighborhoods within official neighborhoods. Where else can people from all parts of Troy come together, meet, talk with one another, learn with one another, except at the library? The library as a neutral institution is one of the few places an individual can get trusted, accurate information, and for some, it's the only place to get any information. It's also the place where during an economic downturn, people can come to get materials such as books, magazines, CDs, DVDs, newspapers, services like printing, job hunting, how-to instructions, museum passes, and the ability to have tech services available too. So that's why libraries are so valuable.
As I alluded to in my intro, I think the most important role the library plays is as a community center. There's a concept called a third space, which is a place where people can gather and freely express themselves. And I think this is where community really happens. And having a third place like the library, which is free to use and open to everyone, is incredibly important to supporting that sense of community. You can use it in almost any way you like. You can gather to discuss books, ideas, play games, or just enjoy your own company and get lost in a good book. On a personal level, the reason the library is important to me is as a gateway to education. I'm a lifelong learner. I never get tired of learning new facts, new skills, new hobbies. And not only does the library help me on my quest to learn, it introduces me to things that I might not have ever found otherwise.
I think you guessed your message.
I feel like we're hearing a lot of the same themes, but leaning into that same general tendency, I also think that the most important role of the library is providing a place for learning, whether that's accessing information that's here on the shelves, on the internet, whether that's sharing information with different people, community members who come here, hearing local book talks, things like that. It's important to have a space where you can come, relax, enjoy recreation or cultural exchange, and get all of those basic human needs, I think, that we all have, that the library is vital to meeting.
So this is the final question that we're going to propose to the board, and then we'll do some questions from the public. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing our library today, and how do you see the Troy Public Library responding to those challenges? And we're going to start with you, Evelyn.
The question of relevance comes up often. Why is the library necessary when one has TikTok, YouTube, and the internet in general? Well, does one want neutral, trusted information? That's what librarians are for. They cut through the noise and chatter. They help individuals clarify the questions they really want answered. The way to counter the belief that the library is a dinosaur is to continually make people aware of what the library has to offer, its materials, its programs, its services. It's a task meant for many, not just the administration and staff, but also the board, the friends, and members of the public. Share the word. Once people understand the need for the library, they may also understand the need to fund it appropriately. This library has issues with two aging structures, and the board needs to be mindful of the dual need to protect and stabilize the building, but needs to find solutions for the delivery of service that are not prohibitively expensive. Certainly, the library needs enough frontline staff in order to keep the library open and to keep employees safe. Materials of all formats keeps increasing in price. And what is a library if we can't provide materials and services?
We're gonna go to Louis.
I think that the library is facing two major challenges. One is providing the community with the programs and services it deserves. We're using fewer resources than it needs. The other is obtaining and retaining the talented staff that actually design and implement those services. The root of both of those challenges is money. Like Tim showed us earlier, we are one of the least well-funded libraries in the region. Our per capita budget is 1/3 of what Albany has. And as a, getting ahead of myself. Recently, the budget proposals have been a lot more ambitious, and I am a big fan of that. I would like to see that trend continue. As a board member, it'll be part of my job to educate the community on why the library needs the money that it needs, why the budget needs to increase. That way we can see the votes we need to see the budget passed.
Anthony?
So I think that the two most important challenges facing the library are the buildings and staffing. I think everybody sitting here tonight can appreciate that we're sitting in an architectural gem. And having sat through Tim's presentation, I think everyone can also appreciate the fact that it's going to require funding just to keep operating the buildings that we have to deliver the services that we're providing currently. That's not even thinking about long-term planning. So I think one of the key tasks of the board over the next 3 years of a board term are creating the long-term plan for how to think about these buildings and what the future of the library looks like, you know, perhaps beyond these buildings in terms of how to continue delivering services throughout the community. And obviously, the other big part of that is having the people to deliver those services. As Louis pointed out aptly, you know, both of those challenges do require money. So that always is the lurking behind any attempt to figure out the long-term plan is how are you going to achieve that, you know, in terms of this year's tax levy, future tax levies, other sources of capital funds when it comes to a capital plan for, you know, what to do about the buildings. So that's not going to happen in 3 years, but I think that the planning is the most important part of board services, thinking strategically about what the future of the library looks like and coming up with a plan to deliver not just the ongoing services that we all need over the course of these 3 years, but a plan that'll take us into the future.
Now, following up on what you said, what I identified was the ability to predict the future. That's the biggest challenge. For example, we're putting in HVAC, but the city is also undergoing a geothermal project. We didn't know whether that would actually happen or when it will happen. So we are putting in HVAC with the opportunity to then make it work with the geothermal. Another thing, an example of that is the state education building, where they went to a lot of work to put wiring into this historic building, only to have it succeeded by wireless internet service. But more practically speaking, I feel the biggest challenge is the funding for the library. Library's been underfunded since 1897. Mrs. Hart built the Hart Memorial Library and contributed $5,000 toward operations. She offered an additional $5,000 if Troy would raise $45,000 for the library. They didn't. My neighbor told me she remembers the library as having a mummy. There was also a rare statue of Byron that was sold by the library. It's just been ongoing. We chose the director for his vision of what the library can be, but the library currently does not have the funding to fulfill that vision. The age of the buildings has been blamed, but the library buildings have never undergone a renovation. Much newer local buildings have been renovated. And one has even sought to renovate once again. Funding was unsuccessful. Lastly, I see the library also is needing to fill in gaps in the community. Thank you.
And following up on some great answers. Interestingly, and sort of ironically, I found this question to be the most challenging when I was reading through the questions. Primarily because, as Tim went through in his presentation, how do you look at a spider web of challenges and pick out and prioritize the strings that may or may not catalyze other challenges? So it's almost an impossible question. But at the same time, what kept coming back to me as I continued leaning into it was to not be afraid, of the different challenges that there are, because there are always going to be challenges. In our everyday life, there are challenges. How do we address them in our everyday life? It's day by day. And so I think there is something to trying to foretell the future. I think there's something in looking at our past, and there's something about looking at our present and just listening to what speaks the loudest. And I don't know that there's necessarily an answer to that. I don't know that any one person can have the answer to that. So for me to stand up here and say what I think the biggest challenges are, I think would be a little bit disingenuous to myself. I think it just is a matter of really learning how to not be afraid of what is confronting us every day. And that is what I would like to try and bring a little bit to the board. Thank you.
So we have 4 questions. People have time for 4 questions. Nope. Yeah, okay. We'll try to go as quick as we can. What would you change about the Troy Library system and why? If many things, what are your priorities? So we'll start with Marie.
I think that I've already spoken to a lot of what I consider the priorities, and also what the priorities should be for the library in terms of our duty of obedience. I'm not sure what the question's trying to get at.
Does the person who asked the question clarify, or you're good?
Just to kind of get at a lot about the different pieces, but and without expire that material, right? You want to get in there and
So the next, Anthony, we're gonna go to you.
So we're going with, what do you want to change, or what are your priorities?
I guess priorities is what you're looking for.
I guess basically, the range and accessibility of services, right? So ensuring that the space is open and providing services that the community needs and values. Basically, the range and accessibility of services.
Well, since we're going back to the priorities, I suppose what comes to me first is, in this current moment, to try and learn the system as much as possible. So it would be learning the system before I perceive any need to change anything.
At the risk of looking like I'm unoriginal, I want to steal both Anthony and his answers. Because I think the library is not doing its job if it's not reaching as many people as possible. So finding out how we can do that is key. And like Samantha says, I maybe need more information before I really focus on something. And I want to ask the experts. I want to know what the librarians think needs improving. I want to know what all of you think needs improving. So let me know after this.
I think there's going to be a theme here. Certainly, from my perspective and from what I hear from people, it's having services, programming back, ways to get people into the library to be together. There's been some slippage, and hopefully we can get that back. But it is what the library is here to do, is programs, services, and making people know what we have to offer and making sure we actually have those things to offer.
This is the next question. Where do you stand on the library remaining in its current buildings? Start with you, Louis.
I am not a person who is driven by sentiment. I think that if we look at the financial, we look at the numbers, we project the cost of remaining in this building over the years, and it is much higher than finding a new space. I think it's worth considering finding a new location. This is a beautiful space, and it would be sad to give it up. But if it's irresponsible to keep it, then we have the responsibility not to.
Anthony?
So, as I mentioned before, I think this building is an architectural gem. Like Lewis, I think that we need to think about the future of the library and the services that we're providing. So we need to evaluate all options. And, realistically, I think continuing to provide the services and expanding the services that we provide in the current space is probably unrealistic. The question is, what does that time scale look like, and what are the other options available? So I think that is a serious question that the board needs to have in conjunction with the director and the community about how to continue and expand the services that the library provides and what the physical space will look like. Does that mean, another location somewhere else in addition to this? Does this mean that this building converts to something else within the library system that's not a branch? I think we need to evaluate all those options and figure out what makes the most sense for the future of the library.
I don't see the library being confined to the buildings that it has currently in terms of its branches. I do think that the buildings enhance the experience of users and brings people into the libraries. So I am open to discussing different options and finding, as I say, with the inability to predict the future, what will be needed in terms of physical structures for our libraries.
My favorite topics. If people have listened to me over the years, I'm a great believer, and you can have your cake and eat it too. This is a fabulous building, no doubt. And it's something we need to keep as a library. It does not need to be a circulating library. It can stay as is, be a special interest library. I've said it could be a giant Troy room for quite some years, and have another location close at hand where people can actually walk. People who don't live downtown can drive. And yes, we have looked at a location, it's still in my head, where everyone can meet again. And there's ways to do it. We can keep this as a branch. The system gave us a go ahead some years ago, but a lot of people think that we have to be at 102nd Street. But the thing is, to make it anywhere as near a 21st century library is prohibitively expensive. And it will never actually be a modern library. So there's got to be that balance of where we go, someplace that can get people in it and still use a space as part of our own library system. I think that's really important to look at. I know not everybody likes that idea, and I know people who actually think it's a great idea because they know there's issues with this building and having community in here, having meetings in here, and doing all the things that a library should be doing. Stop. I'm always happy to talk more about it.
I find this question really interesting because actually, while I was gaining the petition signatures for this candidacy, someone brought this exact question up to me, and it was the first time I had ever had been confronted with the question of moving the library out of this building. And at first, it really caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know how to respond. And quite frankly, I'm really happy to hear all the responses that I've heard. I'm learning from them as I'm sitting here listening, and I think that they're absolutely correct. It's a beautiful gem. I think we can all agree to that. It has its limitations. It also has its opportunities. And I think finding where it feels correct is a really hard question. And I don't know, based on the current budget, depending on how it goes, how that question will continue to come up in the conversations with the board. So that'll be interesting to see. But I too am open to having that conversation.
So what is your experience with organized labor? Will you support the library union in reasonable demands for increased pay and better working conditions? And how will you do that? And we'll start with, Samantha.
I do support the union. I will just start by saying that. I will also be candid in saying that when I found out that the union was offering to endorse the candidates, at first, that too caught me off guard, and I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. I didn't really know what my response was, and the more that I asked around and had opinions, heard opinions, and the more I thought about it and felt about it, the more I felt it was awkward and a little bit of an ethical issue. And I don't really want to get too much into that. I do support the union. My feelings about their endorsement of board candidates doesn't have any impact on the way that I feel about unions supporting staff members. I think that's extremely important for the staff to feel that they are represented. So I support the union.
Well, in my past, checkered past, I have been a member of a union, yes, but I've never had to be part of a negotiation. And I know there's things going on that are done in executive session, so I don't know where the negotiations are headed. The idea of the union is to protect staff and make sure that they're paid well, safe, and, you know, can do the jobs to the best of their abilities. It's funny that Samantha brought up the endorsement. One of the things I believe in is the integrity of the board. I believe it is wholly an apolitical, nonpartisan entity, and I have never taken an endorsement. And I actually wrote back and said, no, I cannot do that. Because again, we need to be independent thinkers, independent questioners. And it doesn't mean we don't agree with what a union is or what it could do, but in order to make the discussion work, you can't be part of the other entity. So I did not go after an endorsement, and I will not go after an endorsement. As long as the union is doing what it is supposed to do, I think it's absolutely great. And I know it was staff who asked for it in the first place. I know the people who were here at the very, very beginning aren't actually here anymore, but others have taken up the charge, and I have to stop again.
I've heard that unions are formed or employees join unions because they aren't being heard. As I mentioned, I am a union member, which I know may sound really strange because I'm retired. It's out of gratitude. The union that I belong to advocated for me successfully when I alone would not have achieved the same result. Then for a second time, they advocated for something that was occurring to a lot of retirees, and they were not successful. But at least they tried. So out of gratitude for what the union has done for me, I have continued to be a union member. I support the union for the library because of that, because of the way it advocates for the employees.
I support the union 100%. I support all unions. I think unions are necessary to make the workers' voices proportional to the leadership. And I think the workers, whether they're in the library or a Fortune 500 or any company, provide all or most of the value to that company or entity. That's it.
I also support the union. I'm a union member myself, like Marie, although not been fortunate enough to retire yet, like Marie, maybe someday. But I think that overall unions are vital to making workplaces fair, giving workers a voice. These are all benefits. I think it's made the place where I work a stronger workplace and built solidarity amongst the people working there. I haven't had the opportunity to be involved at all in what's going on with the library's organizing efforts, but I hope it's doing the same here. And so I also have had the experience being on the board of Joseph's House, of being on the board of an organization where a union was forming. They voted to unionize while I was on the board there, and I was supportive of their efforts. I fully support the staff's unionizing drive here from the other side of the table. So having had both experiences, I'm strongly in support and happy that that the library is taking that leap with staff.
This is a final question. This was a two-part. We already answered, I believe we addressed the first one, which was about book banning, but there was a second part. What do you think about insulating the library from outside political interferences? And we will start with Evelyn.
For those of you who actually heard me say that we are an apolitical, nonpartisan entity, I think that also is the answer to this. We need to be insulated from it. Doesn't mean we can't hear what's being said. However, we can't answer directly to those opinions, to those pressures, because there are decisions that need to be made, not for the benefit of a political party or any entity, but need to be made for the community at large and for the library itself. So anytime we can insulate ourselves, it's a better thing. And again, I know I said if someone wants to do a program here, I might not always agree with what someone has to say, but again, as long as it meets certain requirements, that's one thing. But as a board, we have to stand firm, and I like that word, insulate ourselves from that.
The library is apolitical and should remain apolitical. I think the term insulate makes me think of completely withdrawing. In New York, in this district, we have a Republican senator and we've got a Democratic assembly member. And I don't think that we should be shying away from reaching out to them or their successors for support, grant money, that kind of thing. We should not be doing so on a political basis, nor do we need to, because the library is not, the library's mission is not a political.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said so far. The library is essentially apolitical, and I would refer back to some of the things I said in response to the question about material selection and use of the space, by various groups. If those are coming from politically motivated actors to try to remove things from the shelves, I think the library needs to stand firm against efforts like that. And as far as use of the space, has to be open to all, regardless of their viewpoint. So, like everyone else, I think who's spoken so far, I would agree that it has to remain apolitical.
Well, thank you, Evelyn, for bringing up the apolitical term. I'm going to continue on with that. It is interesting, kind of based on what Lewis is saying, or piggybacking off of what Lewis was saying. It almost seemed like it was getting a little bit philosophical as to what, forgetting the term that you were gonna insulating, thank you. Getting a little bit philosophical about what it is to be insulated, and I could say the same thing about politics. What does it really even mean to be political? What does it mean to have political conversations and have political interests and have political perspectives and political strategies? To label someone as being political, I think that's sort of an interesting question. Where do we draw the line between what someone's apolitical perspective might be and the perspective that maybe it is political? Where do we draw that line? And so I think trying to dive into that kind of question and really dissect it, it could be important. It could also be really complicated. And so I think to what degree and how important that is, how valuable that is to the board is going to be an ongoing question. Especially in a continuing, evolving political landscape, which our society is, our world is. I don't think that you can escape from those kind of conversations. But I also think we should have some caution, absolutely.
I'm surprised about this question because I don't usually think of political influence associated with the library. The library does allow use of its meeting rooms for political meetings, doesn't allow campaigning as part of that. I personally try to be careful of what I say publicly because I don't want the library or other organizations that I'm associated with to be hurt by what I might say. So yeah, politics and the library just don't mix.
So that was our last question. I just wanted to thank you all. We're grateful that you took the time to be here. And to be part of these important conversations. Your interest and support mean so much to us, and they make a real difference in shaping the future of our library. And a heartfelt thank you to the candidates for stepping forward to run for the Board of Trustees. I know it's not easy, I ran this year. Your dedication, time, and commitment to serving the community through the library are truly commendable, and we're fortunate to have such thoughtful individuals willing to take on this role. So please feel free to stay for a little bit after if you have any questions that you wanted to ask individual people, or if you want to ask more in-depth questions about the budget. And thank you again.
Tuesday, September 16th from 12 noon to 8 p.m. Here at 102nd Street, 27-114 at the Lansing Road Bridge.
Good job, everyone.